Fresh out of business school, Phil Knight borrowed $50 from his father and launched a company with one simple mission: import high-quality, low-cost running shoes from Japan. Selling the shoes from the trunk of his car in 1963, Knight grossed $8,000 that first year. Fast forward to today, and Nike is a global powerhouse, raking in over $30 billion annually. The iconic Nike Swoosh logo is instantly recognizable worldwide. Knight has led Nike from a scrappy upstart to a sportswear giant, making it the gold standard in the age of startups. Yet Phil Knight, the man behind the Swoosh, has always been a mystery. Phil Knight wakes up from a nightmare, and it wasn't just any dream, it was his reality. His life felt like it had no purpose. Not sure what to do with himself, he ends up at the University of Oregon studying journalism. But as fate would have it, he also gets into running with the legendary track coach Bill Bowerman, a guru of Olympic athletes. They hit it off big time. Fast forward to graduation day in 1959, Phil's got that journalism degree in hand, but he's still in the what am I doing with my life zone, like seriously lost. He had this secret athlete dream but had to admit that ship had sailed. He joins the army, thinking maybe this will give me some direction. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Frustration and anger are his new buddies. Then, post-army, he tries out grad school at Stanford University. At this point, Phil's like, okay universe, give me a sign. And guess what? The universe delivers. While Phil's working on some business school assignment, a light bulb goes off in his head. He scribbles down on a piece of paper, can Japanese sports shoes do to German sports shoes what Japanese cameras did to German cameras? See, he had noticed how Japanese cameras like Nikon and Canon had swept in and replaced German ones. That got him thinking, could we do the same thing with running shoes? Now, in the late 1950s, Adidas and Puma were the big shots in the American running shoe game. Phil, though, had heard some whispers about Japan and their experimental shoe designs. Plus, he knew it'd be cheaper to make shoes there. So he dives headfirst into this business class assignment, believing there's something huge here. But when he presents this genius idea to the class, crickets. No one else seems to see it. He even shares it with his buddies, but they're all like, yeah, whatever, Phil. But here's the kicker. If Phil wants to make this happen, he's starting from ground zero. No contacts in Japan, zero knowledge about importing shoes, and zilch on how to sell them in America. Phil Knight graduates from business school in 1962, but guess what? He's right back home with his parents. That whole, what am I doing with my life, feelings come back, and it's hitting him hard. But one day, something changes. Phil decides he can't just wait around for some magical opportunity to fall from the sky. Nah, he's got to create that opportunity himself. So, he and a buddy hatch a crazy plan. They're going on a globe-trotting adventure. Now, Phil's still got that Japanese shoe dream burning inside him, so he figures, why not swing by Japan? But before that, they hit up some classic European cities, backpack across Asia, and even make a pit stop in Greece to check out the Temple of Athena Nike, the goddess of victory. Then, it's off to Hawaii. Oh boy, Hawaii. They surf, chill on the beach, and fall in love with the place. So much so that they snag jobs in Honolulu, selling encyclopedias door to door just to stay a bit longer in this tropical paradise. But Phil isn't exactly the sales superstar. He's pretty shy and not making bank. Eventually, he decides it's time to move on. His buddies found love, so stays behind, so Phil's back to solo travel mode. And guess where he's headed? Japan, baby! In 1962, in the city of Kobe, Phil stumbles upon a running shoe that catches his eye, a brand called Tiger, made by a company named Onitsuka. These shoes are the real deal, top-notch quality and reasonably priced. Phil's smitten. He doesn't waste a second. He picks up the phone and cold calls the folks at Onitsuka. They agree to meet. Now Phil, a fresh grad in his 20s, suits up and heads to the meeting. He's got a copy of How to Do Business with the Japanese tucked under his arm, and he's done his homework. He's memorized facts, figures, and all the stats about the American shoe market from his college assignment. Despite having zero real business experience, Phil dives into the meeting, introducing himself as an American shoe distributor, ready to help market their kicks in the US. And guess what? Onitsuka had already been looking for a way to break into the American market. They're thrilled with Phil's idea. But then comes the million-dollar question. What's the name of your company? Phil's heart starts racing. Truth is, he doesn't have a company. He just has this wild idea about importing Japanese shoes to the US. For a second, he's on the verge of panic, longing to be back home with his parents. But then, out of nowhere, he blurts out, "Gentlemen, I represent Blue Ribbon Sports of Portland, Oregon." Boom! He's invented a company name on the spot, and it's like a jolt of confidence courses through him. He goes on to explain the size of the American market and how Onitsuga's tiger shoes are different, a unique selling point. The Japanese managers are impressed and they start pitching to him, offering to make him their distribution partner in the US. They even agree to send some samples over to his address in America. And that, my friends, the legend of Nike begins. Stay tuned for more. 1 month goes by, then 2, then 3, 4, and still no shoe samples. Phil's patience was running thinner than a shoestring, and he couldn't wrap his head around it. He'd returned to the US with dreams of Japanese shoes dancing in his head after what felt like a promising meeting with those Japanese shoe folk. But where were the samples he'd been promised? He'd even shelled out $50 for them. So he decides to drop them a letter, a friendly, "Hey, where are my shoes?" kind of letter. And the reply, a vague, "Shoes coming, just a little more days." Well, that's reassuring. Phil, now back at his parents' place, shows the letter to his old man, who just has a good laugh and tells him, "Son, that $50 is long gone." With his dreams in the dumps, Phil takes a job to make some cash. He ends up as an accountant, but it's about as exciting as watching paint dry. Then, one fine morning, 12 pairs of those elusive Japanese shoes finally land on his doorstep. They're here, and they're everything he'd hoped for. Excited as a kid on Christmas morning, Phil rushes to his old running coach, Bill Bowerman, to show off the shoes and get his expert opinion. Bowerman was no slouch in the running world, and he had this knack for tinkering with shoes to make athletes' lives better. Sometimes it just made their feet ache, but most times it improved those shoes beyond belief. And here's a fun story. One day, Coach Bowerman was watching his wife make breakfast, and he noticed the grooves in the waffle maker. Suddenly, a light bulb went off. He thought, hey, these waffle patterns would make a fantastic multi-surface sole for a running shoe. So our man Bobby has grabbed some plastic epoxy and attempted to make a sole for his shoe, but oops, he forgot the anti-sticking agent. Long story short, he ruined the waffle iron and probably breakfast too. After a new waffle iron, a few more attempts, and likely some apologies, he finally created a design that is still used today. Bowerman was the real deal, and Phil was itching to know what he thought of these Japanese kicks. And here's the shocker, Bowerman loved them so much he offered to be Phil's business partner. This wasn't your average partnership, this was a match made in running heaven. Bowerman, with his track expertise and shoe obsession, was the ideal partner. So they shake on it. Phil and Bowerman, co-founders of the new company, Blue Ribbon Sports. They each kick in $500, and that cash goes straight into ordering a sweet 300 pairs of shoes from Japan. Priced at around $333 a pop, and Phil's not done. He pens a letter to Onitsuga, the folks behind those tiger shoes, asking if Blue Ribbon Sports could be the exclusive Western US distributor for these sneaks. To his delight, they agree, and in April 1964, a shipment of 300 tiger shoes arrives from Japan. Phil's got shoes, a business partner, and a killer supply. But there's a teensy problem. Where the heck does he sell them? Local sports stores aren't taking him seriously. They reckon they've got their track shoes sorted. So what does Phil do? Alright, here's where things start to get real sticky for our hero Phil Knight. He's got 300 pairs of these fantastic Japanese shoes, and he's not about to let them sit around and collect dust. So what does he do? He hits the road, quite literally. Phil becomes the unofficial shoe dealer of track meets and running clubs. He's out there, trunk popped, showing off these kicks with an enthusiasm that's contagious. Runners, coaches, fans, they all get a taste of Phil's passion, and they're buying it, quite literally. In just 3 months, those 300 pairs sold out. Now, back in the day when Phil tried his hand at sales peddling encyclopedias door to door, he bombed, big time. But these running shoes, selling them almost feels too easy. Why? Because Phil believes in them with his heart and soul. He's convinced these shoes are the real deal, and folks can sense it. Quality, affordability, and a guy who believes in what he's selling, that's a winning combo. By the end of the first year, Blue Ribbon Sports has raked in $8,000 in sales. That's no small potatoes. With that cash, Phil orders a cool 900 more pairs from Japan. But he's not stopping there. He recruits a team of sales reps, mainly ex-runners who share the vision. They're working solely on commission, making $2 for every pair they sell. These road warriors are hitting every high school and college track meet they can find. Success begets success. Phil secures a bank loan to move Blue Ribbon Sports out of his parents' basement and into its first real office. Since Bowerman has a full-time gig, Phil hires their first full-time employee, Jeff Johnson, who, by the way, will play a pivotal role in the company's future. But for now, they're still rocking the name Blue Ribbon Sports. Sales are rising like a rocket, and in 1966, they opened their first retail store to sell their shoes. They designed the store like a runner's paradise, a place to hang out, chat, and flip through running-related books. It's a magnet for athletes. While Phil and Johnson are handling the business side of things, Bowerman's getting his hands dirty on the creative end. He's tinkering with shoe designs, tearing apart Japanese imports and sending notes to the manufacturers in Japan on how to improve them. Bowerman is practically designing Onitsuga's shoes for them. But Bowerman isn't just an innovator, he's a coach too. He starts coaching popular runners and future Olympians, building their brand and selling even more shoes. He's almost single-handedly responsible for making jogging a thing in the 60s. His book about jogging sells over 1 million copies, and suddenly there's a huge demand for running shoes. Who better to buy them from than the guy who popularized jogging? One of Phil's shoe designs, the Cortez, becomes the top-selling shoe in 1969, and Blue Ribbon Sports rakes in around $300,000 in revenue. Business is booming, but here comes the twist. Phil, thinking that the future of his company lies with Onitsuka, discovers they've got problems. They're slow to produce the innovations Phil and Bowerman suggest, sometimes ignoring their advice altogether. To make matters worse, they've been prioritizing their Japanese customers, leaving Phil in a lurch. When Phil approaches Onitsuka about an exclusive distribution deal for all of America, not just the West, they initially say no, citing concerns about Blue Ribbon's size and readiness. But, quick as lightning, Phil invents an East Coast office they don't actually have, and Onitsuka bites the bait. After this meeting, Phil does something bold. He sends out flyers asking people to invest in Blue Ribbon Sports. They say it's a fast-growing shoe company looking to expand, but nobody responds. It's humiliating and it's scary, but there's one glimmer of hope. Bob Woodell's parents, an early Blue Ribbon employee, offer their entire life savings, $8,000, to help the company stay afloat. It's a lifeline Phil didn't want to take, but the banks refused to loan more, so he had little choice. On the bright side, both Phil and Bowerman genuinely love Onitsuka's shoes. They respect the Japanese brand's quality, and thanks to their work, Onitsuka has become a powerhouse in the US. Things seem peachy, but Phil's in for a rude awakening. Blue Ribbon's rapid success has led to a slew of new stores, and Phil's constantly juggling cash flow to support the growing business. It's getting tight. The Cortez, their star shoe, is flying off the shelves faster than they can stock them. Phil begs Onitsuka to speed up their shipments. It turns out Onitsuka has been selling to Japanese customers first and then importing whatever's left to the US. It's a kick in the gut for Phil, but there's not much he can do about it. To make matters worse, Onitsuka is slow to implement suggestions, leaving Bowerman frustrated. Hoping to improve things, Phil sets up a face-to-face meeting with Onitsuka's Kitami. But the meeting is weird. Kitami says Blue Ribbon sales are disappointing and doesn't seem keen on renewing their contract. Phil's baffled. He's convinced they've earned the extension. But when Kitami steps out, Phil spies a folder in his briefcase. Inside are the names of 18 athletic shoe distributors across the US and a schedule for meetings. Onitsuka's been secretly plotting to replace Blue Ribbon with other distributors. It's a stab in the back. In a bold move, Phil confronts Onitsuka about it, but they give him an ultimatum: sell 51% of Blue Ribbon Sports to them or watch as they cozy up to other distributors. Phil's answer? A resounding no. He won't sell. He can't believe it's come to this. And so, the battle lines are drawn. Phil is about to go to war to protect his dream. So Onitsuka decided to part ways, taking the Tiger brand with them, but Phil and Bowerman weren't about to let that be the end of their story. In fact, they saw this as a golden opportunity. They thought, why just be a distributor? Why not create our own shoes? After all, the Cortez, Onitsuka's bestseller, Bowerman had designed it, so why not cut out the middleman and craft their own kicks? But first things first, they needed a new name. Phil's initial idea, Dimension 6, was about as exciting as dry toast, and pretty much nobody liked it. But then, Jeff Johnson, their first employee, dropped a bombshell. He had dreamed up a name overnight: Nike. Phil's response? What? But Johnson explained it. Nike, the Greek winged goddess of victory. Phil, thinking back to that temple he had visited in Greece, couldn't deny the perfect fit. So, with limited options and time running out, Nike it was. Now, they needed a logo. They hired a graphic design student for a measly $35, and she whipped up the iconic Swoosh. And just like that, Nike had its name and its look. But they needed more than that. They needed someone to actually make these high-quality, affordable shoes they were dreaming of. They had the design, a new take on the popular Cortez, but finding the right manufacturer, easier said than done. The initial manufacturers they tested, quality control nightmares. At a company meeting, Phil drops the bombshell. Our partnership with Onitsuka is over, and we're on our own now. We're calling this new line Nike, but there are big quality problems. We need to get it sorted, and we don't have much time. He looked around the room. What did he see? Defeat, despair. But Phil knew he needed to lift their spirits, so he shifted gears and said, so, in other words, this is the moment we've been waiting for. No more selling someone else's brand. Onitsuka has been holding us down for years. Late deliveries, mixed up orders, ignoring our design ideas. Let's not see this as a crisis. Let's see this as our liberation. And just like that, the mood shifted. The employees were fired up. They got to work thinking about how to make Nike a success and find the right manufacturers. Phil wasn't making the same mistake twice. Instead of putting all their eggs in one manufacturing basket, he created a network of manufacturers, giving Nike full control over production. But wait, the Onitsuka saga wasn't over yet. Onitsuka had the audacity to sue Blue Ribbon Sports, claiming that creating Nike breached their contract, which stated Blue Ribbon would only sell Tiger shoes. Phil wasn't having it. He countersued, accusing Onitsuka of trying to break their exclusivity deal. In the end, they settled and went their separate ways. In 1971, Blue Ribbon Sports officially became Nike. By this point, they were raking in over $1 million in sales per year, but that was just the tip of the swoosh-shaped iceberg. The 1972 Olympics catapulted Nike onto the global stage. Revenue surged to $14 million in 1976 and then doubled in just 1 year to a whopping $28 million in 1977. Phil was on fire. He opened factories worldwide and reinvested everything back into the company. Nike wasn't just gaining market share, it was becoming a fashion statement. However, success draws envy like a moth to a flame. Many American brands watch Nike's ascent closely, waiting for their chance to take a swing at the giant. By this point, Nike was soaring high. Sales were through the roof and people were loving what they had to offer. Legal disputes were in the rearview mirror. However, there was a small hiccup. They were pretty cash poor. Phil Knight, the man with the Midas touch, was reinvesting every dime back into the company and even borrowing money to supercharge their growth. In his eyes, it was grow or go extinct. So Nike just kept ordering more shoes, opening more stores, and hiring more folks. But Phil had a master plan to fund this expansion: take Nike public. It seemed like a smart move, right? Well, just when things were looking up, a letter arrived that changed the game. The letter was a bill from the US Customs Service demanding $25 million. At first, Phil thought it was a prank or a massive error. If they really owed that much, it would have been a knockout punch, and everything they built would vanish like smoke. But this was no joke. It was a real, sinister plot. Nike's American competitors, like Keds and Converse, saw the swoosh as a threat that could wipe them out. So they did what any scared competitor would do: they lobbied the government. Their demand? Enforce the American Selling Price, ASP. Now, ASP was a dusty old rule from before the Great Depression. It said that if a similar shoe was manufactured in the US, anyone importing a similar shoe from abroad had to pay a hefty import duty. Basically, it was a sneaky way to promote nationalism and make imported shoes way more expensive. So Nike's rivals thought they'd outsmarted the game. They created knockoffs of Nike shoes, jacked up the prices, and boom! They had a so-called American alternative. And since Nike was importing from Japan, they got slapped with massive import fees thanks to this archaic rule. Every pair meant an extra $6 payment. But wait, it gets worse. These import duties were backdated 3 years, leading to that whopping $25 million bill. Phil knew there was no way they could pay that much, so there was only one option: a fight. He hired a top-notch lawyer, and for 3 grueling years, they went toe-to-toe with the customs office, Converse Keds, and their allies in court. Nike even aired a TV commercial to tell their story, rallying customers to their cause. And guess what? It worked! Nike's competitors and government cronies realized they were up against a relentless opponent. They eventually settled on $9 million instead of the crushing $25 million. Phil still thought it was unfair, but Nike had grown like a wildfire during those 3 years, raking in $440 million in sale, so they could afford to pay and put the whole ordeal behind them. In 1980, Nike went public, wiping out their cash flow problems and giving them the fuel to rev up their growth engine. With a 46% share, Phil Knight became a wealthy man. Now, remember the parents of one of Nike's early employees who invested their life savings to help the company survive? They weren't looking to make a buck, they just wanted to keep the company afloat. Well, they got shares in return. After Nike went public, Phil had the joy of telling them that their initial $8,000 investment was now worth a cool $1.6 million. From there, Nike only grew bigger. They made deals with Chinese factories and became the first American shoemaker to set up shop in China. They branded into clothing, offering more than just shoes and attracting more investors. Plus, it gave them an edge in negotiations with athletes for endorsement deals. Speaking of endorsements, that was one of Nike's aces in the hole. In 1984, they made a game-changing decision. Their basketball division was on fire, so they decided to sponsor a player from the 1984 NBA draft. Keep in mind, this draft had a bunch of talented folks to choose from, but guess who they went with? A 6'6" shooting guard with $1 million smile who had just won the NACC tournament. Nike bet big on MJ, and the rest is history. Over the years, they inked deals with rising stars like Tiger Woods and LeBron James when they were just rookies. As these athletes soared to superstardom, Nike's popularity followed suit. By 1986, Nike had trampled over Converse and taken over the crown as the biggest sports brand in America. It seemed like an incredible success story, right? Well, hold on tight, because behind this glittering success lay a dark, sinister secret. A secret that involved violence, slavery, harassment, and child labor. And that secret was about to be exposed. But before we dive into this epic tale, can I ask you a little favor? We're here to serve you up some insane business stories and knowledge bombs. But subscribing alone won't guarantee you catch all our content. So if you're loving what you see, and trust me, there's more bombs coming your way, why not hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on a single gem? Just flick that bell on and we'll be forever grateful. Alright, now back to Nike. Let's fast forward to 1991. At Nike HQ, it was just another ordinary day. That is, until a bombshell dropped. An American labor activist named Jeffrey Ballinger released a report that shook Nike's reputation to its core. In his documentary, Behind the Swoosh, Ballinger exposed Nike for allegedly using child labor and exploiting folks in underdeveloped countries. The video painted a grim picture. Workers in these far-off lands were said to be living in slums or near open sewers, sharing toilets and bathwater with more than 100 other families. They toiled away in factories, housed in rickety buildings that were fire hazards. During their shifts, they were denied access to basic necessities like drinking water and even toilets. And after enduring all this inhumane treatment, they earned a pitiful $1.25 at the end of the day. But wait, there's more. In 2001, a BBC documentary zoomed in on a Cambodian factory used by Nike. The grim focus: 6 girls working 7 days a week, often for a staggering 16 hours a day. Predictably, these bombshell revelations triggered a tidal wave of backlash. Students and activists worldwide took to the streets, protesting against Nike. Calls for a total boycott rang out, and some universities severed all ties with the brand. Sales plummeted, and Nike stock took a nosedive, plunging 15%. The media painted them as a heartless company willing to exploit workers and deny them the basic wages they deserved. For Phil Knight, this was uncharted territory. He had always been the good guy in his story, but suddenly he was cast as the villain. His response? A promise to personally ensure better conditions at Nike factories worldwide. The next decade was dedicated to damage control. Now, to be perfectly honest, Nike was basically founded on the idea of finding cheaper labor abroad to make high-quality, affordable shoes. But to be fair, Nike did make significant changes to improve conditions for overseas workers. Many human rights activists acknowledged their efforts. However, allegations never fully stopped. In 2005, a company report revealed that workers in up to half its factories still faced issues like forced 60-hour work weeks, sub-minimum wages, and denied access to basic amenities. And in December 2021, the European Centre for Constitutional and Human Rights dropped a criminal complaint against Nike and other brands, alleging they benefited from forced labor in China. Now, in Phil's defense, he argued that the factories involved in these scandals weren't directly controlled by Nike. They merely rented the spaces along with other tenants. While that's no excuse, he did have a point. Singling out Nike for sweatshops missed the bigger picture. Countless multinational companies tapped into overseas labor with shady conditions in their supply chains. Many of the everyday items we use might have been produced by underpaid, overworked laborers. Here's the kicker though, Nike has this uncanny ability to turn controversy into profit. In 2018, they launched a new ad, Dream Crazy, with former NFL player Colin Kaepernick as its voice and face. Kaepernick, who had triggered a political scandal by kneeling during the US national anthem to protest racial injustice and police brutality, was a highly controversial choice. The fallout was intense. Nike stock dropped 2.5%, and outraged folk across the United States burned their Nike shoes and vowed to boycott the company. But then, something interesting happened. Those who shared Kaepernick's sentiments rallied behind the ad and started buying Nike products in a show of support. The result? Nike got more attention than ever before, and their brand value soared by $6 billion, with $163 million in media buzz. Sales shot up by 31%, and they even bagged an Emmy for the most outstanding commercial of 2019. In the end, all the calls for the boycott had little effect on their sales. This wasn't Nike's first rodeo with controversial marketing. In 1988, they kicked off their Just Do It campaign featuring an 80-year-old marathon runner challenging ageism. In 1995, they featured an HIV-positive runner. Why do they take such bold risks in their ads? It's simple. Nike has a seasoned marketing team that weighs the risks against the rewards and makes calculated decisions. In cases like these, they figured the benefits outweighed the costs. Between the launch of the first Just Do It campaign in 1988 and 1999, Nike's sales skyrocketed from $8 million to a jaw-dropping $9.2 billion. Now, after a remarkable 40 years, Phil Knight stepped down as CEO. His journey is nothing short of extraordinary. A young guy with a wild idea who ventured to Japan to turn it into reality, ultimately building the world's biggest sports brand. So, what's your wild idea? Because as Phil's story shows, timing is never perfect, and sometimes you just need to take that leap of faith. Or, in the immortal words of Nike, just do it. If you're itching for more mind-blowing stories of crazy founders on their epic journeys, the story of Crocs is the perfect video to watch after this one. So go ahead, hit that next video, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Thanks for watching. Cheers.